Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I tell my Kashmiri friends also, look my dear, you are isolated on this issue. Outside Kashmir Valley, nobody is there to stand up for you. Even if they stand up, only they will pay a lip sympathy. Other than that, nobody is in favor of restoration of Article 370.
I'm with Mr. Ram Madhav, the member of the RSS's powerful national executive. In fact, he has been a full-time worker of the RSS since 1981 as a 17-year-old in Andhra Pradesh's East Godavari district. In 2014, he was seconded from the RSS to go to the BJP when Prime Minister Narendra Modi first came to power and became one of the most powerful leaders in the party at the time. As the National General Secretary of the BJP, he was responsible for establishing the BJP's presence for the first time in the Kashmir Valley, where the BJP allied with Mufti Muhammad Saeed's PDP to form a government in Jammu and Kashmir. He was also instrumental in establishing the BJP's presence across the Northeast, not just in Assam when the party came to power in 2016, but in all the 7 states. And we'll talk about these issues both in Kashmir, which has just marked the 2nd year of the abrogation of Article 370, as well as in Northeast, as we see that Assam and Mizoram have been facing off for the last few weeks since 6 policemen very unfortunately lost their lives on July 26th. But some of you may not know that actually Mr. Ram Madhav played a very key role in Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy, especially in the early years, not just when the PM went to the US, and we remember very, very clearly the reception that he got at Madison Square Gardens and later in London, in Australia, and many other capitals across the world. But back home in Delhi, as India dealt with Nepal and when Prime Minister KP Oli especially came to power. So Ram Madhavji, welcome to The Print.
Thank you for the exaggerated introduction of me.
But I think, Ram Madhavji, the importance of dialogue, of discussion, of debate remains very, very important in a democracy like ours. We're 73 years old. But one of the reasons why I say this is because we see in Parliament today, which is the highest forum of debate and discussion, and actually that spirit of debate has completely broken down. What is your view on that?
Debate, openness to different viewpoints that includes criticism, is integral to democracy. But it is not a one-way street. On both sides of the spectrum, we must nurture the spirit of discussion, debate. What is dominating today's parliamentary activities? More of walkouts, more of fighting, more of shouting at each other, rather than more of a constructive discussion and debate. In any system, we were in the opposition for a very long time. I tell you, it's largely on the shoulders of the opposition to ensure that we all work smoothly.
But some would say that it's on the shoulders of the ruling party, the treasury benches. They are the ones who should run the house. And if the opposition is saying, let us have a discussion on Pegasus, which is this snooping scandal or alleged surveillance of some people in the opposition as well as journalists. Now, what is the problem with that?
No, the real problem is this whole Pegasus issue is an issue. Hindi mein kehte hain na, na sir na pair. It has no roots, no evidence, no documents are presented in support of the so-called scooping. Just because some American papers, some British papers, and some Indian, digital agencies have published some names and alleged that the government is snooping on them, it cannot be taken up in the parliament.
No, that's fine.
Then every Tom, Dick and Harry will come up with some allegations. You present any proof, I can tell you on Pegasus, even to this day, not a single valid proof has been presented to the people, not just in India, all over the world.
The French government has started an inquiry because
Fair
the
enough.
president.
Fair enough.
Emmanuel
You ask, for
Macron has
an, you ask for an inquiry is one thing.
No.
You wanted a full debate as though there is a great truth in these allegations.
No, so what is the question? The question that the opposition is asking is, has the government of India, because the NSO, the company that has this Pegasus software, has the government of India taken that software or not? It's a simple matter. और अगर parliament में अगर debate की बात है, जैसे आप कह रहे हैं नसर नफे, but if the opposition wants a debate, what is the harm in it?
No, that's what I'm saying. Opposition wants the debate because they believe that something like that has happened.
Rahul
Ruling
Gandhi,
party
opposition
is firmly saying that it's all there's absolutely no truth in it. You are just depending on certain gossip, certain just
Sir,
mere
Rahul Gandhi के phone
allegations,
पे
mere
Rahul Gandhi के
accusations.
phone पे Pegasus software.
No, that's what I'm saying. You are saying it is there. Where is the proof? No proof is presented. You say that some forensic lab in America has done this study. How can you go by some report in America
So
that
do you
somebody
think-
will? No. So I think that the entire edifice on which this Pegasus controversy is sought to be created is utterly without any basis, without any evidence. So probably the ruling party took it
But how do you,
in its own wisdom.
if you remember the winter session of 2013, when at the time the session was washed out completely because the BJP took such strong views on the alleged corruption in the Manmohan Singh government. And at the time, both Arun Jaitley and Sushma Swaraj, I mean, God bless their souls, said that shutting down the House is a legitimate instrument of parliamentary democracy. But that cannot be.
In fact, you have compared it very rightly with the 2013 situation. Their maximum amount of cases were in front of the Supreme Court and there were proven evidences before the Supreme Court in the coal scam and other scams. In this case, the matter is before the Supreme Court. Firstly, no evidence has been placed before the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has not even taken cognizance of it so far. Yet you want a discussion in Parliament.
But do
You
you
at
think,
least present some evidence to people, some evidence to Parliament, some evidence to the court. Let us see. If court takes a view on that, then probably things will
but
be.
in the political class, do you think, Ramanujit, that, say, behind the scenes, ruling party should say to the opposition, कि चलिए हम लोग बैठ के बात करते हैं, इसमें कैसा इसको सुलझाया जाए? Because people of India want that there should be a discussion. Bills are being passed in minutes, no discussion, and very important bills, like for example, the retrospective tax, ये जो अभी आया था Vodafone वाला, but no discussion at all.
See, that is unfortunate. That's why I'm saying the opposition also should now think that while they have registered their serious concerns over this particular issue of snooping, then they have also made enough demonstrations, enough disruptions in the Parliament. Now go back and participate in the debates of all these bills. Continue your protest, but you also participate in the debate when the bills are taken up.
But should
So
there
that
be
is how
some
Parliament should
assurance?
function.
But
See,
should there be
nobody
some
is
assurance?
denying opposition's right to protest, walk out and all these. These are all constitutional and democratic practices.
Right.
When we were in opposition, BJP was in opposition, they did it. So, but when certain parliamentary business is going on, they should participate.
But should the ruling party also reach out and say कि चलिए हम लोग बैठ के बात करें?
See, I'm not in the party, so I cannot be officially knowing about these things. But as far as I know, I have also talked with some senior leaders. They said enough efforts, backroom efforts, have gone into trying to convince the opposition to come and sit for the parliamentary business, because they have already registered the protest enough. They have done it enough, and it is registered in the minds of the people also.
Okay, so let me turn a little bit and let's talk about Jammu and Kashmir. It has been 2 years since the abrogation or the revocation of Article 370. You were the man of the hour. You were instrumental in the PDP alliance with the BJP. So, लेकिन आप मुझे हमको ये बताइए कि on the eve of the abrogation of Article 370, what happened? How did you persuade the ruling party? There are reports in the papers that Congress leader Bhubaneswar Kalita was persuaded. How did that?
No, I was not privy to what happened in the parliament. Obviously, I was not in the parliament.
Yeah.
In any case, this decision was not largely known to many of us also until last couple of days, until just couple of days before that actual thing. We had some idea that there would be some discussion about Article 35A and of course also about Article 370, but what was going to happen, even we were not aware of it. In any case, in the Lok Sabha, obviously party had enough numbers to take it forward. In the Rajya Sabha, what in parliamentary terminology is called the floor management was done effectively by the party leadership.
So, but how did you manage to get around, say, the Congress chief whip at the time?
No, that you should ask the Congress chief whip or the leaders who supported the bill. See, if you look at the broader context, no major political party in India was in support of Article 370. They were all doing it out of certain political compulsions. Earlier, you can check the parliamentary records right from Jawaharlal Nehru's time. Even Nehru had on record said, no, 370 should go. But let us see, it will go on its own, gis jayega. So everybody, after all, it was a part of temporary provisions. It was not a part of any permanent constitutional structure. So everybody was assuming that it would go one day. Probably nobody had the political will or political courage to completely do away with this article, which Prime Minister Modi had. And he could do it in 2 years ago.
So do you feel that the other political parties, that this protests about the application of Article 370, ये सब नाम के वास्ते?
Now, tell me, in the last 2 years, in the entire country, has any political party taken it up as a big issue? Has Congress party taken it up? Have Communists taken it up? Has any party taken it up in the country as a big issue in the last 2 years? That itself shows that on this issue, in fact, I tell my Kashmiri friends also, look, my dear, you are isolated on this issue. Outside Kashmir Valley, nobody is there to stand up for you. Even if they stand up, only they will pay a lip sympathy. Other than that, nobody is in favor of restoration of Article 370. This realization should better dawn on the Valley leadership. It's a unanimous feeling of the entire country across political spectrum that Article 370 should have gone long ago. It has gone now. Let us take it for good. Okay, it has gone. Let us move on. That's the general feeling in the country.
So your former ally, the PDP, and the National Conference, the two big parties in Jammu and Kashmir, are you saying that they are isolated on this cause?
You ask them. I have seen one very senior leader of National Conference openly saying this in a TV interview that the entire country has left us in lurch. No political party has stood by us at this juncture, which is a fact. It is good if they realize that on this issue there is broader national consensus. And everybody wants to move on. So the Valley parties, those one or two leaders who are still, hung on to this exceptionalist politics, they better realize.
But what is this exceptionalist politics? That they believe that they are different from the rest of the country? What is it?
You remember, what was left of Article 370 when it was abrogated? You should ask this question to Kashmiri leaders.
Maybe it was a figure.
Right. So, its remaining or not remaining was not actually going to really affect materially to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. In fact, one very senior Kashmir leader told me, I don't name the leader, he told me something interesting. He said, you see this glass, Article 370, is already empty. It has been emptied out over decades by successive governments. It's there. So, what Modi ji did was, this glass is empty, yet it is still there. Why do you have it there? Just throw it out. But this glass is not just an empty glass. It has been promoted by the so-called mainstream Valley leaders as the sine qua non of their identity, the core of their identity. I can narrate you one very interesting experience of my own. Anecdote from my own experience with during my deliberations. I was speaking to one senior leader of the PDP. Sorry, again, I don't name. That leader told me, you see, don't tell us about development and all. I mean, I told them that, you see, Modi ji wants good development to the people of Jammu and Kashmir.
You're talking about the alliance ki time.
At the time when we were forming the alliance, we met in the Ashoka Hotel. So that leader said, don't tell me all this. We have been hearing about all this for the last 70 years. Every leader in Delhi tells us that we will give you more development. You must remember that when in 1947, people of Kashmir under Sheikh Saab's leadership, when they decided to join India, remember they had options. Yet they decided to join India. India should be grateful to us. And the 370, Article 370 was representative of that gratefulness of the government of India. No, that's not true. Remember,
If you look at when partition happened,
it's not true legally, because remember, the legal process through which these princely states have joined integrated with the rest of the Indian Union was by the decision of the rulers. And you know something very interesting. Muhammad Ali Jinnah had insisted that we should not go by public opinion, we should go by the opinion of the kings or the rulers.
No, but in this case,
so legally, constitutionally, it's wrong. Okay, this position that because people wanted it, we joined here. No, it was a decision taken by the Maharaja that it's a
we can talk about that, because the Maharaja was, the instrument of accession came very, very late. We can argue with that, but Sheikh Abdullah, it was a Muslim majority state. Now, it could have gone to Pakistan. He chose not to go to Pakistan, but chose to come to
India. No, it was not his choice. I'm saying that. You please remember, had he decided to go with Pakistan, what would have happened is a hypothetical question.
Yes.
See, why I'm saying this is, the Maharaja, the Nawab of Junagadh tried to go to Pakistan. What happened to him? The ruler of Hyderabad tried to remain independent. What happened to him? So, had Sheikh Abdullah decided to go to Pakistan, what would have happened is a hypothetical question.
Absolutely.
Don't go into that.
Okay.
I mean, it will unnecessarily create bad this thing.
Yeah.
But fair enough, they decided in their wisdom that now that Maharaja has integrated the state with Indian Union, we are part of India. 370 was given despite opposition by many as a temporary measure because there was a war going on.
Okay.
It was temporary. It was under temporary measure.
So this PDP leader who tells you in the Ashoka Hotel when you are putting
So I am talking about that exceptionalism.
Okay.
So they think that we are not fully part of India because we did this great, sort of charity to India. You should be ever perpetually grateful to us. That exceptionalism has ended with the abrogation of Article 370.
Tell me, Ramadhaji, I mean, we can argue about why it was necessary or why it was not necessary. Obviously, your party believes that it was. But my question is, if it was necessary, why did throw so many leaders into jail after August 5, 2019? Whether it was Farooq Abdullah, whether it was Umar Abdullah, Mehbooba Mufti, even Sajjad Lone, who very famously called Prime Minister his Bada Bhai, usko bhi bichare ko jail ke andar bhej diya.
Number one, extraordinary situations demand extraordinary measures. No, when you take such a major decision about Jammu and Kashmir, revocation of Article 370 was not a smart measure. You agree with that. So the security establishment probably felt that it is necessary for keeping political leaders under preventive detention. It's a preventive detention.
Okay.
See, I was in politics for many years. Preventive detention is a part of the life of a politician. When some I have seen my father being arrested for preventive reasons many times for 2 days, 3 days. When a minister visited our area, my father would be arrested. So this is a part of the life of a politician. It's okay. They were put in jail. Some were put in jail for 3 months, some were for 6 months, some were maximum was 1 year. No, today everybody is free. Everybody is free since last 1 year. Everybody.
No, there are PDP politicians.
Nobody.
Wahid Para is in jail.
No, Wahid Para is in jail for another criminal reason, not for this reason.
No, it's not a criminal reason, but anyway.
No, come on. Wahid Para is arrested. For example, for your information, he was free when he was arrested. He was not in jail. He was arrested just 3 months ago for a different reason of some alleged crime that he was involved in. So that you don't link to 370.
No, so you're saying that you're justifying the fact that these senior politicians, whether it was Mehbooba Mufti, Farooq Saab, these people were put under house arrest. So you're justifying that. And he is MP. He was MP, member of Parliament from Srinagar, if you remember that.
Right. No, that's Indian law allows for preventive detention of politicians. Indian law allows that. preventive detention is not an arrest under any crime. Preventive detention is only when the government feels that it is necessary for managing law and order. We need to put these people respectfully for some time. So that's what was done. With all due respect, they were put under either house arrest or respectfully put in the, that famous Santur Hotel
In Srinagar.
on the banks of Dal Lake, beautiful place.
But did you talk to them? I mean, I'm sure, if you have a golden cage and you put somebody inside, if you put a bird inside a golden cage, the bird is not going to like it very much. So even if the center is beautiful or the convention center on the Sher Kashmir Convention Center is so beautiful, the people under house arrest are certainly not going to like that. And especially when
Obviously, anybody whose freedoms are restricted
yes.
will be unhappy. I'm sure they were all quite unhappy. I had, since you mentioned about Sajad and others, they are all good friends. Even otherwise, also many who were in jail for some duration. I knew most of them, but there was no opportunity even for us to talk to them because the mobile services were not there and they did not have access to that. So it was a security measure that the government took. Everybody should respect it.
But you remember that on the eve of the abrogation, there were lots of rumors in the valley about 10 days or so before August 5. And if you remember the Amarnath Yatra, the pilgrims were all told to come back, the hotels were all evacuated. And there was Farooq Abdullah, Hasnain Masoodi, and Umar Abdullah were amongst a small group of people who went and met Prime Minister Modi. I think it was one day before the abrogation. And he reassured them and he said, Sab theek hai. In fact, he called Farooq Abdullah Bada Bhai in this case and said, Ki sab theek hai. In fact, Hasnain Masoodi told me the story. So, are you saying that even senior politicians like Farooq Abdullah were not taken into account?
I don't know. What all happened between Prime Minister and the leaders of all those parties, I am not aware of it. As I said, even people like us also not having full picture, but we knew something significant will happen. But that's the prerogative of the government. How to, take such measures, what's the procedure to be followed is the prerogative of the government.
So let me take you back to 2015 when you were instrumental in the alliance between the PDP and the BJP. What was the idea behind that alliance? Did you know or did you think at the time that it would lead to the abrogation of 370?
Okay, we talked about it many times, but I don't mind giving that same answer again. One was to respect the mandate. There was a different mandate.
Yeah.
Valley had supported PDP and Jammu had supported overwhelmingly the BJP. Yeah. So for a government to happen there was no other option than these two parties to come together. We also thought that, by bringing PDP into an alliance with us, we would be able to, probably reduce the soft separatist rhetoric in the valley, and we will probably be able to bring more into mainstream.
Mm-hmm. So, and you feel that you succeeded with that?
Largely. Today, if you look at the valley scenario, nobody is there with Mehbooba today. Majority of our own party people are either with Altaf Bukhari or with Sajad Lone, and they are all, their major complaint today is not about 370, but about statehood.
So that's my next question. You abrogate 370, but why take away statehood? And why bifurcate the state into Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh?
No, that's why I said extraordinary situations demand extraordinary measures.
No,
as far as Ladakh is concerned, you must remember, the demand for separate UT status to Ladakh is 70 years old. The first time the demand was placed before Jawaharlal Nehru was in 1948. Since then, the Ladakhis have been demanding a separate, constitutional status as the UT. That we have honored, we have committed that we will, whenever we get an opportunity, we will do that. So we have committed, we have honored our commitment to people of Ladakh. The residual Jammu and Kashmir, because one part has been converted into UT and this major constitutional change has been affected to remaining Jammu and Kashmir, as a temporary measure, probably UT status was given to it. And Home Minister was on record both in the House as well as just 2 weeks ago in front of the leaders of all the political parties at the Prime Minister's residence that at an appropriate time statehood will be given to the present UT of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir.
So would that mean, in your view, coming back together, or would Ladakh still remain separate, or would it be just Jammu and Kashmir would be one state?
No, as far as I know, the Constitution Amendment Bill, which created UT of Jammu and Kashmir, talks of creating a legislature for Jammu and Kashmir UT. That will be UT legislature. Whenever that UT is upgraded as a state again, it will be Jammu and Kashmir state legislature. Ladakh will continue to remain as a separate entity as a UT.
So Ladakh will remain a separate entity and Jammu and Kashmir will remain will become a state.
Whenever that happens, this residual Jammu and Kashmir, which is the present UT, will obviously be the state again.
And Ladakh will remain a UT.
That is the whole purpose of that amendment.
Okay, but one of the things that, China, for example, and you've written a book on China and you know that country quite well, they have said, the Chinese leadership has said, or the spokesperson has said, that one of the reasons for the Chinese to, cross the line of actual control and come into Ladakh, and they have been on Indian territory for more than 1 year now, was because of the abrogation of Article 370. And they said then, you would come cheek by jowl with the center, because the center was now with you.
Now, firstly, as far as my knowledge goes, I am a keen watcher of China, I can tell you. No official statement of that sort has been issued by any Chinese leader. I know China too well. I know China too well to give such flimsy reasons for what they do. They never give such flimsy reasons. Even to this day, entire strategic establishment, not just of India, the world, is struggling to understand the moves of China, why they did that. We can, attribute many reasons to it. Many analysts give many reasons to it. I only say that China, from time to time, wants to assert its dominance. It wants to show that I am the dominant power in the region. I want to grow as a global power. For me to become a global power, first of all, I should have the dominant role in my neighborhood, in Asia. So it keeps doing those things in your neighborhood. So to attribute it to Article 370 will be, taking it too lightly.
Okay.
I don't agree with that kind of a very simplistic analysis. But China remains a big challenge, not just on the border. Of course, border challenge is there. It was there earlier. It will be there for some more time. Mm-hmm. But in the larger scheme of things, it's going to pose a big challenge to the entire, political kind of system that we have developed with great effort in the entire world, not just in India. A sort of democratic, liberal kind of political atmosphere that we try to create in the majority of the countries that will come under severe strain.
So tell me about the India-China relationship, the fact that the Chinese troops are sitting on Indian territory. How do you look at that?
Across the LAC, they are face to face today. Okay. They are definitely not sitting in the Indian territory. There is, of course, we all know that the LAC has different perceptions. We could not finally demarcate together. Yes. We have our demarcation, they have their demarcation. Right. We are holding on in most of the places now. Yes, the worry is where they are now sitting in large numbers. They are engaged in lots of construction activity, building structures and all that. That's definitely a challenge. Government is, Indian side is holding talks with them. Yeah. They have gone back. Generally the understanding is when the LAC and when the border is there, the general understanding is along the border, neither side does any activity. You stay away from the border. Right. You leave it generally peaceful without any activity except that you will patrol it. But they are doing a lot of activity on the border. They are claiming it is only military exercise. Since you mentioned about reasons. The Chinese officially tell Indian government that these are only military exercises that we are doing. Yeah. They don't tell you that 370 is the reason. We are trying to, show our strength. Nothing they will say.
Why would the Chinese do this to a fellow Asian power, to India? After all, Prime Minister...
Have they done it first time? You are saying. Yeah. They have done it repeatedly. They have done it in 2013 in a big way. They have occupied our ports in 2013. We had to make big concessions for them to go back. Chushul area, we had to come back. Then only they went back. See, this tension in some areas along the LAC, especially in the northern sector, in the western sector we call it, along the LAC, it has been there for a long time. It's a serious one this time, I agree. I'm not going to underplay or downplay this thing. It's a serious challenge. I'm sure people, responsible are handling it.
But you feel that India has been withstanding this challenge because they have been on Indian territory for more?
Absolutely. I can tell you a big difference. Earlier, we used to resort only on diplomacy to resolve these issues. Right. But right now, under under the government of Prime Minister Modi, it's twofold. We are engaged in proactive diplomacy, no doubt, but also we are very strongly on the ground, together with strong posturing on the ground. That is a new thing for even the Chinese.
So how did when Prime Minister Modi went to Wuhan to meet Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, then after that, in 2019, Xi Jinping came to India and they had a second summit of Chennai in Mamallapuram. Now, despite these two meetings, and earlier also they had met on several occasions, but despite these two meetings, the Chinese troops are actually crossing the LAC and coming into Indian territory.
Right from 1960s that has happened.
But
You look
today
at 1962 history. In 1960, Chou En-lai was in Delhi with Nehru, long meetings. 1961, he was telling Nehru that we want peaceful progress of our two countries. Deception is integral to China's behavior. Indian strategists know about it. Indian military establishment knows about it. You have to deal with it. You cannot anticipate that in 2020 they will cross your border. So 2019 or 2018 you won't meet with Xi Jinping. It doesn't work that way. Diplomacy will continue, relations will continue, but when challenges arise, we will stand up.
So the BJP has a party-to-party relationship with the Communist Party of China, doesn't it?
Not to my knowledge.
I think
There was an effort from
Yeah.
the CPC side when I was there.
Yeah.
They wanted a formal party-to-party engagement, but BJP leadership has decided that we will not do it now. So I don't know if there is any, in the recent past, I don't think there is any formal relationship between the two parties.
Not since the intrusions across the LAC, but there was one delegation, I think, from the BJP that did go to
Oh,
China.
many, not by one, many. I remember right from 2009 when I was directly involved in this engagement between India and China. Many delegations, many visits happened. Even Mr. Nitin Gadkari visited China. Before that, one other leader went. So between the two countries, there were relations, like we hold relations with all our neighbors. So when things do not work well, then there will be some kind of a stalemate.
So what's interesting for me, Ramadhanji, is that you have, in this conversation of ours in the last few minutes, you've been, you've mentioned Nehru a few times. Do you read Nehru? Have you read?
A lot. I've read Nehru extensively. I've read the entire process of constitution making. I've read the entire history of India's struggle for independence and the partition.
Mhm.
So I know what happened, what transpired during the days of independence also, but during the period post-independence under Nehru and subsequently others, fairly good idea about
No, but his own books, like Discovery of India.
Yeah, absolutely. I have learned a lot from his, especially this book, Discovery of India. But whether what he wrote in Discovery of India, whether he really demonstrated it in his actions is something questionable.
No, the reason I ask you is this, I come back to dialogue and debate. And after the 1962 conflict, in the 1963 Republic Day celebrations, the RSS, they did have, members of the RSS did march in the Republic Day. So it was not as if Nehru and the RSS did not know each other. There must have been a dialogue. There must have been discussions and there must have been debate. So today for the Congress and the BJP and the RSS not to talk to each other, isn't it a bit strange?
Look, as far as RSS is concerned, RSS goes by the principle Sarvesham Avirodhena, meaning RSS has no enemies. It's open to dialogue with anybody. It's open to meeting with anybody. The RSS chief himself meets with a cross-section of the society, everybody he meets. Since we mentioned about 1963, yes, after the contribution of the RSS during the 62 war and also after probably learning more about the RSS, the then government under Nehru had invited RSS to undertake march past shoulder to shoulder with Indian Army on the Rajpath. That's true. But you also must remember, in 1948, this false allegation of Gandhiji's murder and the involvement of RSS was also the handiwork of Nehru government, especially Nehru.
I think it was Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. I did not go to that, Madhuji, because it was Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel
Not true.
who then said, and in fact warned Nehru, that you have to look at the RSS with different eyes and you have to look at them very clearly. But let's not go into that history because otherwise this will be,
So finally, you agree this much that it was the Nehru government which had imposed
Which
ban on
reached out.
RSS.
Yes.
No, it's a big story. I can tell you. I have, being an RSS man, I have studied all the documents also. It's a big story. So many things have never come to light. What happened in the cabinet meeting when Patel said, no, I don't have any evidence to show that RSS is directly involved in it. What Nehru said, these are all probably we cannot support them with documents, so I don't say anything about that.
Okay.
But lot of water has flown
Under the
as
bridge.
under the bridge.
But let's come to the present. Mohan Bhagwat, the Sanchalak of the RSS today, has a couple of weeks ago, said that Muslims are very much part of India, very much part of the Indian DNA. They have no reason to be insecure and they will remain very much part of this country. Now, interestingly, a lot of people from the right wing have been very critical of Mr. Mohan Bhagwat.
No, firstly, Bhagwat ji was not making those observations for the first time. Nor was he the first person to make such observations.
Okay.
If you read Guruji Golwalkar's interview to Saifuddin Gilani in 1972, just 1 year before his death, in that also he categorically states that Muslims should understand that, we are not coming from two different stocks of people. We are all one people. He was addressing the Muslim community. He was telling the Muslim community that don't harbor this suspicion, this apprehension, that Hindus are out to destroy us, or Hindus will finish us off. No, we believe that you are also part and parcel of this society. And for your information, it's not just RSS leadership, Golwalkar or Bhagwat.
Mm-hmm.
You check the records of Jawaharlal Nehru in 1948. His speech to Aligarh Muslim University students. He asked them a very interesting question. He says, you see, I believe that this country to which I belong, I have 5,000-year-old culture and civilization. I belong to that great culture, the great ancestry. Do you also believe in that? This is a question Nehru asked the people of Aligarh Muslim University. Gandhiji tells that our forefathers are same. How can you say we are different?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the line that every sensible Indian leader has taken up with the Muslims. That is what precisely Bhagwat ji has done on that day. He was not telling Hindus anything new. He was telling the Muslims that you should first of all give up your apprehension. Leave your fears.
Mm-hmm.
Join the Hindu brethren. Be one. We can live as one society.
But the point is at this time, the reactions have been very different. It's not the Muslims who have reacted, it's the Hindus have had many very, very critical comments.
Those Hindus who have reacted to it, to them I will only say that, look, Bhagwat ji is generally highlighting the same theme that every Indian leader has always highlighted. And in any case, he was not telling Hindus to do or don't do, do's and don'ts. He was not telling them. He was essentially addressing a Muslim audience. There he presented this view that, do you also agree that we are all one?
Mm-hmm.
Do you also agree that there is no need to be afraid of your brethren, the Hindu brethren?
But were you surprised that you got such a strong backlash from the parts of the Hindu community?
I don't call it a strong backlash. I have seen some people criticizing that statement of Bhagwat ji on social media mostly. Yeah. I've seen it. I will tell them to see it in a proper, they understand the context and also see it in a proper perspective.
You think they misunderstood what Mohan Bhagwat
said? Obviously. I mean, that's why I said, what Bhagwat ji has said, this is not the first time, and he was not the first leader to say that in RSS. Not for that matter, any Indian leader, many prominent Indian leaders have said it before.
Okay. So let's come to the Northeast, where Ramadji played a very instrumental role for several years, bringing the party to power in Assam in 2016. But today, Assam and Mizoram are at each other's throats. This has never happened before. It hasn't happened in decades that 6 policemen belonging to one state have been killed by people from another state.
Very unfortunate. The happenings in the last week of last month were very unfortunate. And in fact, just a couple of days before that, Honorable Home Minister was there in Shillong, meeting with all of them, trying to sort out the things there. See, unfortunately, when these states like Nagaland, Meghalaya, Mizoram were created, I'm not blaming anybody, but generally as a historical record, I'm stating not enough care was taken with respect to demarcation of their boundaries. Had they done properly at that time, these things would not have happened. So there have been tensions along state boundaries. I don't even call them borders. They're state boundaries.
Right.
Simple boundaries. They are not two different countries.
Exactly.
So what
So
happened?
it's not
what-
LAC between India and China.
Absolutely, absolutely. What happened was very unfortunate and leading to death of policemen at the hands of the policemen of the neighboring brotherly state. Is really very unfortunate, very shocking. Having said it, in the last almost more than a week's time, things have normalized. I can give you the information today that there is no blockade. Since yesterday, medical supplies have started going into Mizoram. We only hope that these tempers, because when people die, there will be tempers. So unfortunately, that incident has happened on the that main artery which connects Mizoram with the rest of the country through Assam. So there was a tension, but police and the state administration is trying best to normalize the situation.
The Home Minister has spoken to both chief ministers in Mizoram as well as Hemant Biswa Sarma in Assam. But it was also quite incredible that the two chief ministers were also arguing with each other.
But they were also talking with each other. I mean, they had different viewpoints with respect to what happened. It happens when it happens between two states. But they are also talking to each other 2
But
days
things
ago.
seem to be falling apart very quickly.
No, not really. In fact, things are actually improving now. Two-member delegation, including a senior minister from Assam, was there in Aizawl 2 days ago, and there was a joint statement for peace and restoration of normalcy. It's as I said, the incident was unfortunate, should have been avoided, could have been handled better by both sides. But now there's
By
no
both chief
point.
ministers.
I would say both sides. Basically, chief ministers are not there on the border.
That's
Those
right.
who are responsible could have handled it better. But now there's no point in blaming each other, which is obviously happening. Two things should happen. One is we all have to make sure that the things improve in the area where there is supposed to be not some blockade like thing. Secondly, these cases have to be taken up properly at an appropriate level to make the people feel that justice is rendered.
A big blow to the BJP in the Northeast.
No, not really. I think the governments of both the states will handle it carefully.
On this note, Ram Madhavji, thank you so much for your time. You've been very frank in answering all my questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.